Our next presenter is a newcomer. Our next presenter is Christophe Grandsire-Koevoets, which means cowfoot, by the way. Cow, coo.
Ah, thank you.
We were having this discussion. We saw many cows on the train ride over, and so naturally the discussion turned to cows. I remember that one of the first time I think the first time that I ever encountered anybody else who conlang on the internet was actually Pablo David Flores and his website. The second one was Christophe's website, and it was a fond introduction because I saw, well, here's somebody who at the very least likes to smile a whole lot, and so he's going to be talking to us about something that I find absolutely fascinating, which you may not have heard of, called it's a French term, Surdéclinaison. I don't think we have an English term, do we? So he's going to tell us all about it. Here he is.
Welcome everyone. This talk has been long in the making, not only because I had to think about which subject I would use, but also which kind of presenting tool I would use. So I hope it's going to work out. I hope you're going to enjoy it. And if you think the screen is actually not working, it is. So welcome to this presentation, which is entitled When Morphology Kicks Syntax Out of the Way, when English just seems to lack the words, when a boy plays with the one that is wearing the beret, when overlong and obscure titles seem like the way to go, or, and incidentally, an introduction to Surdéclinaison. So, I don't know for you, but there's something that really fascinates me constantly. Language. And what fascinates me is basically human language. Human languages, what are they? What makes a human language? And especially what makes it different from something that's not language. So basically that's that area that is just happens to be a human language, and everything else that is not human language. And where is that border? How do you define it? And I think actually most conlangers, consciously or unconsciously, are really interested in that border. Of course, we have edgelangers who, with all their experiments, tend to well, sometimes they just go in, they just make something that is a language. Sometimes they just go out and make something that is completely different and could never be spoken as human language, like faith, or all kind of weird things. Sometimes they just kind of straddle the line, and you don't really know whether this is actually possible or not possible. And with edgelangers, it's very visible. It's usually how to say that, a stated goal to study the limits of language. I do believe that even really naturalistic artlangers, even unconsciously, actually do try to search those limits as well. By the way they put languages together to choose features. Most of them just stay around in the very safe area of what's really naturalistic. Some are kind of straddling but end up being very naturalistic. Some are really at the edge, just and think, well, what's naturalistic? Is it really just what exists, or is there more than that? What's possible? And then there's some that by mistake or just for fun, just happen to getting out of there without actually noticing. So basically, I think this border about what is language, not language, is really a fascinating thing. And it brings us quickly to the discussion about universals. whether those Greenbergian ones, which they usually call statistical universals, which is kind of a contradiction in words. Because how can something that is only statistically true can be a universal? I've never quite understood. You also have the universal grammarians who basically try to find the grammar which is inside our brains and which often ends up looking very similar to English grammar. So this discussion about universal always fascinates me, even if it sometimes infuriates me, because we're talking about universals, but are they? And the thing about universals is that you have the ones that are discussed about, but you have the sneaky ones, the ones that you don't see immediately because they are kind of hidden in the way we actually discuss about language. Let me give you an example. Let's start with talking about syntax. Well, syntax is basically, I'll simplify things because I'm not a linguist. Syntax is basically just stringing words together to make meaning. And the way some people like to describe that is what they call phrase structure rules. You might have seen that, like a sentence is a combination of a noun phrase and a verbal phrase. And the particularity of syntax, unless you're a Piran speaker, is that syntax is supposedly recursive. So, for instance, a noun phrase can be an adjectival phrase, a noun phrase, and a prepositional phrase, with the adjectives and the prepositional phrase being optional. That's basically English. And the thing is that this noun phrase can contain its own noun phrase, so you can have more adjectives and more prepositional phrase. You can make something which is actually recursive and thus infinite. You can make infinite sentences. Of course, you can't actually make them because you will run out of breath. But it's in the possibilities to make actually infinite recurrences. Morphology, that's syntax. Morphology, on the other hand, well, it's usually about affixes, sound changes, things like that. We usually describe that with paradigm tables. I mean, I've been terrorized with those things, having to learn them by heart. This is actually the title of a song from Jacques Brel. He was terrorized with those as well. So paradigm tables, so we're talking about tables. So basically, the thing that can be written of, well, of course, sometimes your tables are multidimensional. Sometimes they have, you can have 30 cases, 4 genders, 25 numbers, or what have you, or verbs with 25 slot positions for all kinds of prefixes, suffixes, and etc. But your paradigm tables basically have, even if they have 300,000 cells, that they have that and that's it, because morphology is usually considered non-recursive. And I'm talking mostly here about inflectional morphology. Because if not recursive, meaning that you can't take something that is inflected and then re-inflected, even if you take something that we consider very productive, like Esperanto, and we can do grande gulinarete strezzo, which I think I made this that means something like the quality of being the leader of a small group of tall women. Just made that on the spot. You can, with derivational morphology, you manage to make all kinds of things, but as soon as you come to inflectional morphology, this is what you have. 4 forms, and that's it. There's no recursion possible. Basically, with morphology, inflectional morphology, you're finite. You only can make so many words. So that's basically morphology, and that's basically one of the big differences between morphology and syntax. Syntax allows infinite recurrences, morphology only a finite amount. Or really? Well, or really? I mean, as if you didn't expect it. I mean, I'm not going to make that kind of talk if I'm going to tell you that it's really the case. Let's find Let's look at this. Old Georgian. I won't pronounce it because I don't know how it was pronounced. I don't know if anybody knows how it was pronounced. But it basically means the man's feet. And if you look at how it's constructed, we have foot, this thing, in the nominative plural, and then we have man, genitive, nominative plural. What's going on there? We have man, which is inflected in the genitive, and there is an inflection in the nominative plural. Yeah, you see it. Oh, what's going on? We've got an inflection and an inflection on or over it again. Let's look at something else. Kayardild, a language spoken in Australia somewhere. It looks nice, but if you look at the word, hey, there's something weird going on with what's going on? What does it mean? The woman must have caught fish with a man's net. And if you look at how it looks, woman in the oblique case, catch with, in the past with an oblique case, well, a verb with an oblique case. Okay, well, the traditional description says that it's a case, so I'll keep that. I mean, I'm not a linguist. The fish in the modal ablative and oblique case, the net in instrumental, of course, with the net, modal ablative, oblique case, and the man in the genitive, followed by the instrumental, followed by the modal ablative, followed by the oblique case. Okay, what's going on? What's going on there? Why do we have all those case suffixes following each other, whereas they are supposed not to? You're supposed not to be able to add a case suffix on something that already has a case suffix. This is what in this is called, in good English, Suffixaufnahme. And I know that some of the Germans will say that that's supposed to be a short one, but basically that's how I heard it from a recording. And if you don't pronounce it that way, well, you should. So, what is Suffixaufnahme? There are all kinds of description of this, theories about how about what it is, but I think you can say it's basically a form of agreement. To explain that, I'm going to be a little bit more complex, and this is not my my work. Somebody else, and I can give you a link if you want to about that. Basically, I'm going to talk, right, let's just focus on languages with declensions, with suffixes. And basically, when you use declensions, case suffixes, you have two ways of going with it. You have the so-called group marking. Yeah. Basically, the case marker and all the markers like gender and class is found only once in the noun phrase. Adjectives are invariable when used attributively. Only one noun phrase in a series of opposed and sometimes coordinated noun phrases gets a case marker. So basically, case is a phrase or affix. So you only use one case per noun phrase, one case suffix. So let's take a few examples to show you that. Let's take in English, in the belly of the wild beast. Don't ask me why I chose that example, but it allowed me to have a nice locative followed by a genitive. If you take a language which would be head final, for instance, you would get such a structure, basically your adjective and the genitive noun together bracketed with the genitive case. And then you have your other, your head here, and the whole thing is bracketed through the inassive case forms, for instance. Well, in Hungarian, which is group marking, you have Afeher Vadallanak a Hasaban, and I'm not sure completely if it's called Ashaban, yeah. I'm not good at Hungarian. Which basically looks like when you have an article, but it's white beast in one group, and only beast as the dative. Then again, the article, and belly with the third person singular possessive, and followed by the inessive. And the inessive is only found here, really at the end of that whole noun phrase. If you take a language which is actually head initial, but still has that those case suffixes that are peripheral, you get a weird kind of bracketic thing, where you put noun, the genitive noun, followed by its adjective, followed by its genitive. So the head is there, the whole thing is bracketed with the inessive, which suddenly looks like it's at the end of the adjective, which has the genitive, and that's actually the form in Sumerian, where we don't know how it was pronounced, I won't, but basically heart, beast, white, genitive, locative. But it's not Suffixaufnahme, it's something called double case, because this little case, this locative is actually not on the genitive, it's on the whole phrase. It's on the whole phrase. It's a case of bracketing, and people say that don't quite understand how is that possible, but well, we know it's possible because it exists. So we have this group marking. Another way of marking is called word marking. In this case, the case marker and the other markers like gender and class is iterated at every word of the noun phrase. So basically adjectives show agreement when used attributively, and every noun phrase in a series of opposed and sometimes coordinating noun phrases gets a case marker. Case is a word affix. This is basically the case of Latin. So if we take again our example, if we take again head final language, we get something like the adjective in the genitive, the noun in the genitive, the noun that is completed in the inessive. In Finnish, this is like that, and I don't know, and I didn't know that you had to have a Finnish example in the presentation. So this is pure coincidence. So I'll let you pronounce it because I don't know Finnish. But basically, it's this is white in the genitive, followed by beast in the genitive, followed by belly in the inessive. Wait a second. What did I say? Iterated at every word of the noun phrase. The case marker. It's not. The inessive is not iterated at every word of the noun phrase. Those genitives are part of the noun phrase as well. We still have to bracket to know where the noun phrase starts and ends. Actually, it should be like that. We shouldn't cheat. We should have the inessive, but we should have the other words. They are also part of the noun phrase, so they need the inessive. What is this? It's suffix Aufnahme, basically. Basically, it's the true form of word marking, where actually every word in the noun phrase gets the case of that noun phrase. So, what is going on there? Well, what people say is that some languages, the ones we are usually know in Indo-European and Uralic languages, often have this kind of resistance to add more than one case affix. But it's an additional rule that is on them. It's not something that is natural. The idea should be like this. And I've added an example. At this time, it's a colon, but I thought we're colon, so example, that's old Arabic from Jörg Riemeyer. He couldn't be here today, yesterday, so I thought I'll give him a little piece. And this colon is, in terms of suffix Aufnahme, is pretty much exactly how this works. And that's exactly, again, the same sentence. And all of it happens to be head initial, so it fitted very well. It's basically like all Georgian which would have the same thing. It's basically, so Rambal is belly in the locative, and then Guaralal, Langalal, which is beast and white in the partitive, because in this case that's how you make the genitive, the partitive, and then the locative to show that they are part of this big non-friends. It's basically agreement. So this is actually the normal form of word marking, and languages that hide those ones are the ones that are different. So this is word marking, this is true word marking. And this is Suffixaufnahme. And the Suffixaufnahme is nice because it shows us one thing, that that's all universal about morphology being only finite, not allowing infinite utterances, basically busted. You can, because if you can add a suffix over an also suffix, and you can make a utterance made out of genitive after genitive after genitive, the one of the one of the one of the one of the one. You can, in principle, make infinite utterances only with morphology. But Suffixaufnahme is nice, but it's quite limited. It is basically a phenomenon of agreement. So as a chronology, what can you do with it? Well, you could mark relative clauses with it, for instance. That's nice, but it's an idea, but it's still limited. So what can we do else? How can we stack case affixes on top of each other? What can we do? Well, let's look at something Indo-European for a change. Western Armenian. Well, it looks nice. I can't read it, so there is some kind of transliteration here, which I can't read it either, so I won't say, but I will show you a little bit how it looks like. Basically, this is the main word, means opposite, which is in the genitive, followed by the article, which is a suffix, followed by the plural, because despite being Indo-European, it's pretty much agglutinative, followed by the plural, followed by another article. Okay. It is the N and the earth are two elements of the article, so of the definite article. So we have something the opposite with an article. Those on the other side. That's what it means. What is this? What is this construction? That's basically what we in France, what French linguists call the Surdéclinaison, which is pronounced Surdéclinaison. And yes, some people will say that's not true, but yes, I do pronounce the E and the A differently at this position. There's a whole kind of discussions about whether the A at this position is phonemic. For me, it is. So basically, what is Surdéclinaison? Surdéclinaison is a word invented by French grammarians and linguists, and basically means, it's actually quite simple. The ability some languages have to take an already inflected word and inflect it again, giving it a different function in the phrase and or sentence. That makes it quite different from Suffixaufnahme, which basically doesn't change the function of the phrase. It just tells us where it belongs to. But I need to give you more examples of what Surdéclinaison is, because it's quite a complex subject. There are plenty of cases. So let's go to the language that actually make people invent that word. Basque. Basque, a mystery enveloped in an enigma. So, as you all know, Basque is a small language spoken by about, at the last century, 650,000 people, mostly in northern Spain and a bit of southwestern France. It's an official language in the autonomous community of Basque Country in Spain and in Navarre. In France, it has no status, only that it's not persecuted anymore. So it's not dying, but not very healthy either, although there is a growing community of young people who speak Basque, usually as a mix with Spanish, which can be kind of weird. I've seen some weird things, but basically Basque is it's a language isolate, or at least we don't know anything that is related to Basque. It has been tried, they've related it to everything, including the language of Adam and Eva and the language of the aliens of Area 51. But yeah, it's possibly pre-Indo-European. So basically, it could be the last remnant of what Europe was linguistically like before all those Indo-European people and Uralic people came and said it was their place. So it makes it quite interesting. So, let's give you a little bit primer of Basque. Basque is a language which is spoken by only a few people, but even then they don't even manage to agree on the name of their language. There's that many dialects. Euskara, Euskera, or Esquara are three names of the language. Euskara and Euskera are mostly in the south, and in the French part they usually call it Espoir. Basically, it's I'll just go quickly. Phonology has the 5 cardinal vowels plus the U in Sultan, which is very much influenced by French. It originally had no labiodentals. Now, with all the borrowings from Spanish, they have the F, but they still like the V, like Spanish. They usually transform it to a V. It has a nice distinction between a laminal S with an apical F and the postal over sh. And they have also the affricates that go with it. It has, in some dialects, it has a palatal series, which sometimes also include the nasal and the lateral palatal, especially in the south. The H used to be pronounced now mostly silent. Phonic parts, they have like Spanish, they have 2 phonemes with the R and the R, and neither can start a word. So, for instance, the word for king in Basque was taken from Latin and has become errege, from regen, errege. What they can do is to end a word, and actually they still make the distinction between R and R at the end of a word. Chakur means dog, is with a trail, and ser, which means what, is with a flap. You see it only when they add affixes to it. No phonemic stress or tone, except in Sultan, which likes to do things differently. So we won't talk about that. Morphology is agglutinative, well, mostly. I can show you a full declension of a word later to show you that it's kind of, it's nice, it's complicated. It's mostly suffixing. It is the only ergative absolutive language in Western Europe, which is quite nice, and it's actually quite a pure one, morphologically speaking. It's not split. I think syntactically it's still accusative, but morphologically it's purely ergative. And it has, next to ergative absolutive, between 9 and 15 cases, more, depending on who's counting. I've seen descriptions which go all over the place. It's quite, everybody chooses how many cases it has. It has no genders. It has a fun 3-way number definition distinction. Number and definition are not separated. So, for instance, a word like chori means bird or birds and can be used for both. And as soon as you have the article, you make the difference in singular and plural. So, choria is the bird and choriak is the bird. It's all in the absolutive. Periphrastic conjugations, those are fun. Most of the verbs don't conjugate. They just do periphrastic conjugations. The number of verbs that actually conjugate can be counted in 2 hands or maybe 2 hands and 1 foot. I don't remember exactly. The few synthetic verbs are marked for ergative, absolutive, and dative arguments, and can even have a marking when they don't have the dative. They can have a marking about the listener. It's kind of a dative of relationship, they call that. And of course, it has Surdéclinaison, which is why I'm talking about it. Just go quickly through the syntax. It's weakly SOV in independent clauses, because basically only verb initial sentences are disallowed. And even then, they managed to do it by adding a particle in front. It's strongly SOV in subclauses. It's basically a topic-focused language. It's so important that even in French and Spanish description, they use the word galdegaia, which is the Basque for topic. It's head final, but funnily, it puts its adjectives after nouns. So, for instance, my dog is nire chakura. Nire is basically the genitive of I. But if you say the white dog, it's chakur suria, with suri meaning white. And as you see in the example, it's strongly group marking. The case affix only comes at the end. Also, another proof that suffix Aufnahme is not the same as Surdéclinaison, because suffix Aufnahme can only happen in a word marking language. So to give you an example as how strong it is, Aita altu eta au chikiarekin means with the tall father and the small child. And you basically have this whole thing of undeclined words, father, tall, and child. And then on small, you add and the commutative. And this whole noun phrase with coordination is then completely declined. I find this really fun. And finally, there's a vigesimal counting system, which I don't find that interesting because I partly have that also in my French. So basically, that's Euskara, but we're all here to talk about Surdéclinaison. So let's give you a few examples of how it looks like. You can use the article for that. So let's look at another case. Well, that kind of fits with the movie. Ema kumearen chakura basically means the woman's dog. Woman with the article in the genitive. In the possessive genitive, there's another one. Followed by dog with the article. And if you add the article, if you remove the dog and put an article there, you get Ema kurena arena, which means basically the woman's one, or the one of the woman, or the woman's. And it's a word, it's perfectly correct, and they do it constantly in Basque. And you can decline this thing like it was a normal noun. Say emakuren arena, which is basically this thing in the genitive, and means at the woman's. You use it also for things where we would use separate words, like if you use ni, which means I, you make nire, which is an old form of the genitive, which means my. Nirea, mine. And then you just carry on declining it, like it would be a normal noun. The nice part about it is that it's indeed recursive. Gisonaren echea, the house of the man. Gisonarena, the one of the man, who can be put in the genitive. Gisonarenaren, of the one of the man. And that you can add the article on that. Gisonarenarena, the one of the man. I won't go so far. And then I just have to add this. Basque is one of those nice languages which do all kinds of weird things. That's, for instance, two genitive cases. The other one is called the locative genitive, which is used for anything that is not really possessive. So and it ends with ko. So for instance, echekoatea, the door of the house, basically means the door in at the house. The house cannot own things, so you use the locative genitive. And I said the house, but we don't have an article. It's actually correct. That's one of the weird things of Basque declensions, is that when you have a local case, which is the genitive, the locative genitive is considered local, in the definite, it loses the article before, and it's in the indefinite that you add a little thing. In the indefinite of a house, it would be echetako. It's all kinds of weird things. I can show you later if you want, if we have still time. It's a genitive, so you can put the article on it and say echekoa, the one of the house. You cannot re-add ko on it. That's the difference between the other genitive. You cannot say echekoko. Doesn't mean anything. You can put this in the normal genitive, in the possessive genitive, echekoaren, and then carry on again. But so that's with the article. But the nice thing about ko is that you can add it to other things. For instance, ures. That's gold in the instrumental. That's basically an adverbial phrase which means made in gold, made with gold. You can add ko to it. Uresco means golden. You basically transformed an adverbial phrase that couldn't be added on a noun into a phrase that can be added on a noun. Basically, a kind of adjective. Uresco erastuna, the golden ring. You can do that with nearly anything. Bilbora, to or towards Bilbao with the adjective, can become Bilbora Kobidea, the road to Bilbao. And can be very precise with that, because if you want to say the road from Bilbao, it's become Bilbo Titako Bidea, with the tick, which is the ablative. So you can do all kinds of things with ko. You can, well, with this, Arotsarekila, which is basically the commutative of Arots, meaning blacksmith. I didn't invent that example that relates to blacksmith. You will have noticed that before I had a commutative example with ekin. This is an alternative. And this is the alternative where you can add the ko to, meaning Arotsarekila Kogisona, the man who is with the blacksmith. Basically, you can do that with nearly any case. Because those cases you cannot add them on nouns, but if you add the ko, you can. And the nice thing is that you can combine that with the article. This is a nice little example that is given by Father Lafitte, when who is basically he was a Basque, he was a priest, and he's basically the one who wrote the first comprehensive description of Basque language in the 50s. And he has this anecdote about a woman who asked her child who he was playing with, and the child answered in a burst of linguistic creativity, "Ponetare kilakoarekin," which starts with poneta, which means Beret, and let's see if we can see how it looks like. Well, we have here ekin, which is a commutative, with the er is just a liaison. We have an a, that should be the article. Ko, oh, we have Surdéclinaison again with the ko. And then we have ekila, which is the other form of the commutative. Here we have the a. Well, the article a can disappear when it's after an a. So ponetare kilakoarekin, with the one who is wearing the beret. Well, it was the shortest way to say that. The boy, as I remember, was 6 or 7, to tell you how early they learned this Surdéclinaison. That's really a fun thing to do. You just make this. You Surdécline it once with ko. You Surdécline it the second time with a. You could go there for ever if you want. You can make you could make nearly full sentences with that. Actually, Basque hardly ever uses subclauses because of that, because it can do a lot of those things. So that's with the suffixal. What we can do is, I talked about making subclauses. Relative subclauses. That's a funny thing. That's really a funny thing. Let's look at a bit of a longer sentence. Karesek atso leo tiglorum sia autikidu means Peter has thrown the vase yesterday through the window, basically. To relativize a verb in Basque is quite simple. Just add the possessive genitive to the verb, which is conjugated. Piaresek atsoleiotic audiki duen loromsia. The vase, loromsia, that Peter had thrown yesterday through the window. Do, which is basically the auxiliary here, which is conjugated, gets the genitive case. A verb gets a genitive case. And the nice part is that you can add, it's a genitive case, so you can add the article to it. Piaresek atsoleiotic audiki duena, the one that Peter has thrown yesterday through the window. That you can even add the genitive to that, duenaren, duenarena, of the one, then you can get, for instance, Piaresek atsoleiotic audiki duenarena, the one that Peter has thrown yesterday through the window. It can go forever like that. Another example is completive clauses, those things that can replace accusative or nominative or subjects. Let's take a simple sentence. Emenda is here. And then let's add the allative. What can we do with the allative? The allative, we had it with Bilbao, it was Bilbora. There's another form in la. And when you add it to a verb, you can make, in this case, for instance, randout, he's told me, emendela, that is here. This is for basically a declarative completive sentence. So he's told me that is here. If you had the genitive positive, the possessive genitive, in this case, you make a wishful completive. Or something else. For instance, Nayago dut emenden, I prefer him to be here. The thing is that this emenden and emendela, if you add to emendela the partitive case, or to emenden the article followed by the initial case, you get two sentences, two subclauses, emendelaric and emendenean, which mean basically the same thing. When he's here. That's basically how they make temporal subclauses. So that's quite fun. But if we go back to emendela, we have this little co, which can transform anything that completes a verb into something that completes a noun. Can't we use it on a completive clause? Of course we can. Emendela cogisona. It's again a relative clause, but this time kind of it's a wishful thinking basically. So emendela cogisona means the man who is supposed to be here, whereas emenden gisona is the man who is here. You can do all kinds of things with Surdéclinaison. I could give you plenty of examples, so I will just finish with a few of the plenty of other things you can do. The suffix ki, which is not a case suffix, at least not anymore, is basically an adverbial suffix. It transforms adjectives like on, good, into adverbs. Ongi, well. It can transform also nouns, asto, donkey, into an adverb. Astoki, stupidly. What can it do as well is take a noun like ore, honor, put it in the instrumental, ores, with honor. I think the Basques found this a little too short, so they just added ki to it to mean oreski, to mean honorably. Why they added that? It was not necessary, but they thought it was good, so they did it. It seems that the Basques actually don't actually care whether a noun is already declined and think, oh, but it doesn't look like it's enough. I'll just add something to it. It goes so far that I mentioned before that depending on who's counting, Basque can have between 11 or 17 cases or something like that. That because many of the cases look like combination of others. For instance, we have the benefactive in ensat, and then we have the possessive genitive in en and the prolative in sat. The benefactive basically means for, in favor of, and the prolative means for as in as. I want him for president. That's basically the prolative. And it seems that the benefactive, and actually many grammars consider it to be true, is actually just the prolative of the genitive. Oh, fun. If we look like the commutative, we have basically more than one form. We have ekin, we have ekila, which is usually more ekilam. It seems that we have this little key. We know it. We know from nire, mai, that the possessive genitive used to have the form a, without the n. That was added later. We know that for sure. So it looks, and we know that the inessive used to be just an n. So it looks like this ekin is actually the inessive of the instrumental, because the key is for now for adverb, but it seemed like it used to be an instrumental. The inessive of the instrumental of the possessive genitive. If you look at ekilan, hey, we've got la. That's one of the allomorphs of the allative. The inessive of the allative of the instrumental of the possessive genitive. That's the commutative. Why not? So, and then you have all kinds of weird one-offs that somebody probably thought was nice to make, and they just caught fire and just kept on being used like on salaric, which means we need to do well. I'd like to do well, which is basically another adverb which means well in the allative followed by the partitive. Why? Nobody knows, but they just found it nice. Another example is gerostic, meaning later on, which is basically the word gero, which means future, put in the instrumental and then in the ablative. And later on, yeah, okay. There are plenty of expressions like that, which just add 2 or 3 cases onto a word to mean something that looks related but quite different. And people are not quite sure what the history of those words is, but they're there. Actually, you even see it in some cases that some adjectives don't form their adverb with ki, but with ski, with the z of the instrumental. Somehow they wanted the instrumental first before adding the ki of the adverb. Why? Why not? So that's basically what they do with Surdéclinaison in Basque. So what can we do as conlangers with Surdéclinaison? Well, I've tried to find examples of conlangs with Surdéclinaison, but it's not a very well-known phenomenon. So I had to end up talking about my own. Moten, which is in the language itself, Moten Kulu, which is basically a language that I started working on after I had discovered Basque. So I have to say it's very much influenced by Basque. What is this language? I wanted something that was simple to pronounce, but looked complicated, and included Surdéclinaison. That was basically my goals with that. And I made that, I'm talking about 18 or 19 years ago. So I started a long time ago on that. Phonology, quite simple. 5 cardinal vowels, no rhotic. It has lateral, so that's there. It has 2 affricates, the and the, written with a little bar. The bar is there because it was still the time when I was writing what I was doing, and I had very simple phonology, so most of the phonemes fitted quite nicely on letters of the alphabet. And there were those few ones that I just couldn't fit, and I did not like making normal digraphs. So what did I do? I just started writing in front of the letter. It looked like with a T, but without the bar. So it became just a chop. And when I started typing, I thought, oh, the pipe just looks like this, so let's use it. So suddenly I have those 2 letters. I also have 2 palatals, lia and nye, which are also written with that little bar. Syllable structure quite simple, CCVC. Most of the words are CVCVC or CVCV. Very complex phonotactics. That's what I really wanted to try to do something that had that when you add a suffix or an affix, that it completely changes the form of the word to make it look as if it was irregular without being. No phonemic stress. I thought French doesn't have it, Basque doesn't have it. Why should I have it? Morphology, kind of agglutinative, kind of fusional, very much in fixing. I had just discovered in fixing. I thought it was fun. So basically, three core cases: accusative, nominative, accusative, genitive. It's quite simple, marked by an infix and a suffix. I'll show it later. Definition is marked by an infix. I just copied the Basque article, but made it an infix. Plus something that I call functional prefixes. There are 7 of them, and they are not really cases, but they are not really not cases either. It's difficult to describe them. They are really prefixes, they are not clitics, but they are not only used with nouns. I'll show it later. It's what I call split nominative language. I'm going to explain. The subject of an intransitive verb is always in the nominative, but if you have transitive verbs, it depends on volition. Yeah, I don't know what I was doing when I created this language, but basically, the nominative subject of a transitive verb means volition. That person was actually wanting to do the action. While if the subject is non-volitional, more experiencing or something like that, it has to be in the instrumental, which is one of the functional prefixes. So basically, I did something that was split, but instead of splitting the intransitive verbs, I split the transitive ones. It's a kind of a fluid S, but for transitive verbs. Of course, I had to take the periphrastic conjugations of a Basque, but I went even further. There's only 2 auxiliaries that can get conjugated, and the rest is all periphrastic. And I made all kind of weird things with that. I'll show you a little. Finite verbs are unmarked for person. I just mark them for tense and realis. And of course, it has Surdéclinaison because I wanted it. Quickly on the syntax, it's unlike Basque, is strongly SOV. I liked it. Very much topic focus as well, like Basque, basically. Of course, another fun feature of Basque that I borrowed was head final, but adjectives follow nouns. Actually, I even went further. Moten doesn't have adjectives. It just has nouns. And basically, anything that is just after a noun, any noun that is put after a noun, just like that in this slot, after a noun is considered an adjective. So to give you an idea, which look a little bit like the Basque examples I gave before, Gvai Badei is like Nire Chakura, means my dog. But if I didn't have a word for, I didn't remember the word for white because actually, but that's something else. Basque Moten doesn't have color words. So you can ask later if there's still time, but it's another story. So I took slow, well, basically slowness, buntu, and becomes Badi Bonti, the slow dog, which shows again strongly group marking, like Basque. Let's set an example that looks a little bit that the Basque one I gave. Getsamukol Opa Katsikodeyun, with the old father and the young man. It's basically Getsem, father, Ukol, old age. Since Ukol is after Getsem, it becomes an adjective. Opa means end. I didn't know Greek at that time, so it doesn't come from there. Katse just means man. And then we have Odun, youth, which is added to man, so it means young. And since it's group marking, all the markings come only on that word. We have the article A, which is actually an infix, goes in front of the last vowel. A and U don't agree with each other, so there's a Y that comes in between. That's the complex phonotactics that I was talking about. And then we have the instrumental prefix ko, which goes in front. So we end up with kodeyun. Yeah, O and O become O. So Getsem Ukol Opa Katsi kodeyun, with the old father and the young man. And something that I added, whereas I didn't really know about Japanese then, it's counters or optional classifiers. They're slightly different. Basically, they're when you add a number to a noun, you just put it as an adjective. So, Badi Yabusu, 101 dogs. because I just don't know how you call those spotted ones in modern yet. But you have so-called counters, and what they do is that they basically suffix to numbers. And sponda, which means small animal, basically anything that is smaller than you. Kit, large animal, which means anything that you have to look like that. Sponda is one of those counters, so you get Yapusu sponda, 101 small animals, and you can use it as a kind of optional classifier. And instead of counting dogs with just the number, count dogs with a whole little nice thing, because dogs are usually smaller than you. That becomes Badi Yapusu sponda. A child who had 101 St. Bernards with him would probably say Badi Yapusukit, which basically means small, big animals. You can do that with people as well. The fun part about numbers, that's something I added because I liked it, is that when they're short, they can go in front of the noun instead of behind, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So, katse, two men. Katse should be the plural, it actually is. The plural mark is an infix S, which disappears before the etse. So that's why it doesn't look plural, it actually is. The word focus means person, and is a counter, so when you add it to egg, it means two, you get egg voces, because phonotactics again, which means two people, and that can be used as a classifier, katse egg voces. A classifier has to become an adjective, so it has to go after. So that's it about the features. So let's talk about how I implemented Surdéclinaison in Mot10. That's a nice part. Hey, with the article. Am I going to copy Basque for everything? Well, yeah. I even copied the example. We have Elion, which means woman, and Badi, which means dog, which, by the way, comes from the name of my dog, indeed. Woman, you add the article, which is the infix A, it becomes Elion. If you add the genitive, which in the singular is made with the infix V and the suffix E, you get Elievon. The E disappears with the N, becomes Nye. The V, well, it's okay between the A and the O, so it gets less like that. So Elievon Badai. Body with, of course, the article Badai. The woman's dog. This Elievon, you can add the article to it, which is an infix, so it gets in front of the O. Elieveon means the woman's one. And the example I had was in the in Basque was in the locative, if I remember correctly. Let's do the same. Now, Mot10 is special in that it doesn't have really special cases. Basically, its core cases, nominative, accusative, genitive, have each three meanings. Core meaning, subject, object, possessor. Spatial meaning, locative, allative, delative, or ablative, whatever you want to call it. And temporal, which basically time, duration, frequency. It's very nice, it's very easy. Sometimes it can get complex, a bit weird, and you can't know what a word actually does. So Mot10 has two prefixes that are added to a declined word to indicate what I mean than in the spatial meaning or in the temporal meaning. They are not mandatory, that's why it's in parentheses in this case. And more is basically the spatial prefix. So you get Elieveon or more Elieveon, which is basically other women's. It doesn't look like it changed much from this because the locative is basically the nominative, so you don't add anything. To make another very simple example, which looks exactly like Basque, ga means I, gvai is my, so mine is gveai naturally. Just the article. A bit of About recursion, again, as remember arena. Can I do that in Montaigne? Well, you bet I can. Katsevei Umpei, the house of the man. Katsevei. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Katsevei, there's the A, and if you add an A in front, it disappears. But it's still there, so it means Katsevei alone means the one of the man. It reappears again when you put this thing in the genitive. Katsevei, of the one of the man. And of course, Katsevei, of the one of the one of the one of the man. And Katsevei, well, you get my point. So that's basically it. You see that there's no example about the locative genitive. Is that because Montaigne doesn't have one? It only has one genitive, which means it can use the genitive on other cases. Let's copy Basque again. Fully means gold. You put it in the instrumental co. Co-fully, made with gold, made in gold, can only complete a verb. It's an adverbial phrase. So let's put it in the genitive. No. What's happening? Okay. Co-fully. Co-fully. Just co-fully in the genitive means golden. And co-fully visane, the golden ring. Quite simple, actually. Let's take something a little bit more complicated, something with an actual core case. In this case, used spatially. Mumpedin means to the house. It's basically umpedin, which is the accusative definite of house, with mo as a special prefix. So mumpedin, to the house. Can we put that in the genitive? Naturally. Mumpedvigne porteius, which means the door to the house. Portus means the door. Portus means door, so porteius, the door. Mumpedvigne porteius. I didn't have Bilbao, I didn't have roads, that's why I took a door to the house. You can, of course, do the door from the house as well. In this case, you would have the genitive form of this instead. And the nice part is that you can do that with phrases as well. So, vai la dilia, dilia means mother. So, vai dilia is your mother. With the benefactive prefix lia, you get vai lia dilia, which means for your mother. So you can, with the genitive, make it into vai. Liadilia vai zanei, which is basically the ring for your mother. I thought of that because it's just been Mother's Day. It's not for my mother, so that's why it's for your mother. But it's basically just vai ladilia in the genitive, and then you can add it to the ring. So basically, that's the kind of things you can do with the genitive. I didn't have a long example of what you could do because it was, I think it was, at that time it was Thursday evening at 1 o'clock, and I was just kind of falling asleep in front of the keyboard. So I just thought, well, the hell with it. You get the idea. To make subclauses. Oh, are we going to copy Basque again? Relative? Well, actually not in this case. Relatives are formed differently. Simple sentence, cogalidean ipelialito. You get an example of well, actually you get an example of an instrumental used as experiencing subject. Ninedan is linan, bird in the accusative definite. Ipeliai is basically what I call the infinitive, but it's actually basically a verbal noun, which means to see or to watch. And ito is the verb to be. It's the verb to be in the present. So I see the bird. Forming a relative clause is actually done differently. The verb have a so-called dependent form. So it becomes koga ipelia itos linean. But this dependent form can still get the article. Koga epelia iteos. But what is nice is that you can do what you can do with the Surdéclinaison on verbs is adverbial clauses. So let's say he is here. Izunlai ito. Izunlai is the verb to be at a place. If you use the temporal affix and the nominative, izunlai dito, when he's here. If instead you use the temporal and the accusative, izunlai didon, as long as he's here. You can even put a prefix, the causative. Izunlai zonto, because he's here. So basically all those things can happen. You just use Surdéclinaison for all kinds of adverbial clauses. And then put them in the genitive to make them again into relative clauses or such. And plenty of other things, naturally, but I still have to discover them. So that's it about Moten. That's it about Surdéclinaison. I'm gonna have to thank you for listening to my babble. To thank especially David Peterson and the LCS to give me this opportunity, and just a little bit about how I made this presentation. Basically, I use this is a Prezi that you can find out on prezi.com. It's actually there. It's online there. A few pieces of it were made with Inkscape, the beautiful drawings, and all on my computer, which is just happens to run Ubuntu Linux. The battle flag is not from me, so I have to put this little copyright. The map is actually derivative work based on another map, so I have to do that as well. And if you have any questions.
Maybe one minute.
Hold on.
I might have missed something, but I was wondering whether Surdéclinaison occurred in only group marking languages or whether
I don't know of any case of a word marking language that actually features Surdéclinaison. Well, actually, I think Armenian is also word marking, but this example is only for Western Armenian, because Eastern Armenian, which is this supposed standard, doesn't have it. And I don't see anything that makes it impossible. I don't know, I might get on widely. That might be the thing why it's not known. But Surdéclinaison is only found in a very few languages, mostly in Basque.
Yeah, maybe it's a very stupid question, but there was one thing that made me kind of curious. If in the sentence "I see a bird," I is in the instrumental case.
Yeah,
so
that's.
If you want to say "I see the bird with my binoculars," for example,
You
have two instrumentals.
Yeah, simply have two instrumentals. Usually, there's no problem. Let's just say that Moten is a language that lives as much as possible to context. So it doesn't mind if it sounds confusing. It's a bit like Japanese. Actually, all the examples I gave were a little bit overwritten because. In a normal sentence, you would just leave the subject altogether.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.